controversial prediction, right? Based on at least what we've seen so far. So, and before we even start, condone this shit. Don't do it. Don't be like this guy. All right. But also, in order for us to not turn into this guy, we need to understand how the hell that happened. So, based on at least the experiences that I've seen that's been posted online about past people that do incidents like this to now, there's a typical theme that follows along, and we're going to try to differentiate the nuances of this particular case in a way, but also keep in mind what we've found out so far. And there's some other things too, some other aspects of this case that we can kind of derive from how certain people are acting when delivering the information regarding this case, whether they have a political bias of some sort or whatever. So, regardless, don't condone this stuff, but we need to get back to some actual conversation instead of the amount of friggin' hate that's out there and just fueling on that, which I get that people want this sort of thing to stop, right? But whenever we try to have the conversations and we get to the point where we're trying to figure out ways of, looking at this, everyone is just limited on what they can perceive of every situation. That is a fact. Without being able to piece things together, to take the time to actually piece things together with any of these situations, for instance, and to stick to one political side, or, I mean, this is the other thing too that I'm surprised not more people are picking up on, but understanding what other people are saying. It's just simple shit like that. And things being misconstrued out of context. People just overthinking a lot of shit that's being said, but at the same time, they're not thinking about the right aspects of certain things that are said, especially from certain people that are in leadership roles or officials, etc. And clearly over time, words just they change meanings for one reason or another. But not to be misconstrued, we're just looking at one, what we've been told here, regardless of political ideology. Of course, that's a part of this in some way, shape, or form. The people that Tyler Robinson conversated with, I mean, whether they knew about this or not, that's a whole other that's a part of the investigation, regardless. And I mean, the easiest way to think about it, and to even sum it all up in general, when you're looking at issues like this, you're looking at it from the standpoint of someone like existence, right? So whether you want something to exist, someone to exist, or whatever. And that's fundamentally how this sort of thing happens. Because when people aren't really taught the importance of existence, when they're growing up with just the rhetoric, whether regardless of whatever side, but especially during incidents like this, we can tell by the actions and what people say, how they deal with these situations, what their intentions and reasons for doing so is, and what they're really trying to accomplish, and not the misconstrued bullshit that's coming from the opposite side, okay? Or even if some aspects of the things that are like responded to are correct, it typically just ends there with the conversation, and the conversation doesn't carry on. There's no real debate. So a lot of this misunderstanding, and when other people see these sorts of conversations or see or hear what other people are saying about situations like this, it's left up to the imagination. And with the frequency, or at least how we recognize these things, because mind you, when we looked at the data over since the last 50 years, it's actually slowed down a lot significantly on both sides, regardless. So, and then we look at from 2020 to now, it's not what it seems. And plus, there's so many other instances, smaller instances that happen simultaneously, mind you, to what happened here, that people see in passing, and they just chalk it up to whatever. They don't even bother looking into it anymore, for the most part. And that's what certain people are using, knowing that people don't take that time to understand shit, especially the more stuff that's going on at once, the harder it is to keep track as things develop, because everything is kind of relative. And this is how, at least thinking of this situation, I'm going to predict what the intent was, what the reasons were. Because clearly we know, at least from the last conversation, that right before the incident, conversation that this kid had with his parents had to do with, how he felt about Charlie Kirk. Now, there's probably more details involved. I mean, clearly what we know of the family is they're on the right. Tyler, probably depending on when he started going on to these sites and talking to these people for however long he knew them for, throughout his teenage years, most likely, as a lot of these instances tend to be like that. regardless of whatever quote unquote political circle, which we'll get into the part of the politics that we need to actually make more sense of, especially when shit like this happens. Because even if there's an aspect of political ideology at play, typically it's not only because of that, obviously. So when we look at what happened in Pennsylvania, we know that that person was raised on more conservative side, but they didn't like politics both sides because at least from the information that we've had, and to sum it up, he thought that the politicians weren't doing enough, right? Because he was planning on both. It just happened that Trump was first. So that's crazy. People got hurt, people passed. It's not good. But when you just stick to the ideology part, clearly there is one side, when you start looking at it just objectively, that disavows and does not want the existence of a lot of things, right? Just in general, because they don't want to see crime and what they believe is crime. And when people believe that things are crimes, it could be a lot of things. It doesn't have to be life threatening. It could just simply be someone's way of thinking that's criminal to them. And people don't seem to realize that they slip into that mindset, not understanding how the mind works, how you process information, how you react to things that are going on. So, at least from this instance regarding Mr. Robinson, parents raised him on some weapons training, probably for fun or whatever. Religious connection, as we know that he confessed to his pastor, apparently, from the news source that we have. And also, this is another aspect, is that whoever turned him in, we can probably look it up. And because this is at least based on what we know so far. I'm curious what happened first. I mean, besides saying it to the Discord, which is another aspect, because clearly these people see the rhetoric. They don't like the existence of said rhetoric, right? Because it's not accepting the existence of something else, whether it's, good or bad in this, but it's certain aspects clearly, especially when there was someone that was transitioned, which, mind you, that person, one, hasn't been arrested for anything. So they probably would have by now if there had anything to do with like prior knowledge of sorts. I know there was some information about a note and some sort of forensic evidence or whatever through the investigation stuff, but at least as far as we know, there's no charges on them. And plus, they were part of the ones turning Tyler in. Now, this is why I'm looking up to see what happened first, whether it was the parents, which they did the right thing, or Tyler himself. And it's all news articles. Brother. But I mean, even in that instance, he's not really working with authorities. Unless we just don't have any just confirmed information as to the timeline of this. Oh yeah, apparently this was after, and then, yeah, someone called them out saying that they thought they saw them. They were like, oh yeah, it's a doppelganger or whatever. So like I was saying, there was no real push to at least be like, it's not the right thing to do. You shouldn't be doing that. If anything, go upstage and debate him. Like, clearly there's that because there's so much hate coming from one side. And when you're growing up on with a family that has specific ideals that they clearly want you to, follow, and depending on how they handle the interactions with their son throughout his life, especially as he is starting to experience these things, mind you, he went to college for like a month. So clearly, I mean, one, he got the experience to be able to handle such weaponry from that lifestyle, which in terms of self-defense, sure. But at the same time, you have people saying that, in order to maintain the Second Amendment right, gun deaths are necessary and stuff like that. And also not believing in empathy. And as we've seen in other instances like this, typically some sort of radical behavior, parts of the ideology that go a little bit too far. And when you have the experience and that sort of, that yuck, right? Just that hate kind of, it just festers up. And then when you start seeing after, probably before when this kid did all this, I don't know what he was exposed to with his family, especially if he knows about Charlie Kirk, which is the thing. This was all about Charlie Kirk and the things that he was saying. We know that. That's a fact. That's what he's confessed to. And it's the reactions that he experienced online, right? But by the end of the day, it was still his decision to do that, to do what he did. Because at the same time, people, especially even after this incident, have been saying the same shit. And then to go back and be like, oh, it's because you're acting like this. And then you end up doing that. As the pendulum just swings twice as hard the other direction. And it's the same pattern over and over again. So you can try to say it's leftist ideology, but as we saw, this person was registered unaffiliated, right? And as far as we know, they never participated in any election. So how can you really say that they're actually on the left when the politicians, the people on the left that you continue to demonize and blame for these sorts of things? I mean, the only thing that they're making the comparisons to times past with the sort of speech that's coming from the right. That's just a fact. And the right's doing the same thing with the left. And it's a pendulum, right? Keep adding force into there, it keeps going harder and it comes down faster. And without actually calling these issues out for what they are and predicting that this is simply someone that grew up thinking and accepting that such violence was okay, such means were okay. And then when they go to experience what the side that was being demonized for so long, right, for over a decade, just because someone wants to be a different gender, it's like you had got the technology, and this is another prediction I'm going to throw out there real quick. With humanity as itself, we are having an identity crisis because we have one part of the world accepting, well, not even just accepting, but demanding that things stay the way they are, that people don't have the possibility to change who they are. Like, you are who you are and you have to live with that, and that's your problem, right? Whereas we have another side that's like, we have the technology to do things that we would like to do, and we're not threatening the existence of anyone else, like inherently. And when you start even going into the issues like this when it comes to trans, the simple thing is just like, have a different category, especially when it comes to sports. Sure, have trans sports or something. I don't know. Like, these concerns can be addressed, but everyone constantly avoids the truth. Is apparently it's that hard to swallow, but it's so easy to be like, hey, can we just like take a moment to think about this and talk? But at least that's how I see it. And as I'm saying, all in all, maybe Mr. Robinson just really didn't like hearing the hate speech against people with a different culture. I mean, this has literally been the pattern. It has to do with differences of culture and not accepting someone else's culture, even though they're not inherently threatening your existence. They're not really doing the things that people are saying that they're doing. And they're saying these things to distract you, or for, that's a whole other video. But point being, someone grew up on this, saw that that's not true, was like, okay, I really don't like that, but I'm also really just not being told that I shouldn't do certain things or that I should just like take a minute. And that's where the radicalization is, because there's no, especially since he dropped out of college after like a month, he didn't have any professors to consult with. Even in instances like this, like, that's a consideration as well, because college would have taught him to think more critically and to use those thoughts on paper or just to type them out or to debate, you know? But he wasn't there to experience that, to learn how to learn. He only had what he experienced with his family and what he experienced online. And his family clearly didn't know what the fuck was going on, which is a whole other issue. And also depends on the timeline. But this is also what happens when you don't introduce your kids to different things, when you keep them sheltered and you're saying that all these other things that exist out in the world are bad. Like, yes, there are some things that you do that with, like narcotics, right? Or just abuse of any sort, or physical violence, or things that threaten existence, like actually threaten existence. Not just because someone wants to be a little different. That's always been the thing, because the left believes that people should have a right to be a little different if they feel like. Is that really it? And then the side that says they want small government and not to control everything wants to control everything, even though they made executive orders saying that they didn't want it. That's, check out the channel, check out other videos. But regardless, this is the end of the take. At least it's all that hate reflected, right? All that hate that was built up from one side over the years. Kid clearly gets to experience the other side. And obviously, if you're saying those type of things, saying that they don't exist, saying that it's because they exist that they are the problem, even though that's not true. Most of these incidents aren't from people that are trans. That is obvious. There's statistics, there's people that do the analysis. But it's not because just because trans exists, because you can say, you've said that about video games, you said that about so many other things. You said it about people's skin color, you said that about the languages that they talk. So again, it's that pendulum. That's what happened. And clearly the people, his family didn't, I don't know, they either were not involved enough, which it sucks, but they did the right thing. Same thing with his trans partner. They did the right thing by cooperating. They're not the one being arrested. I don't think they're really in on it. They probably were just like, what the fuck? Who knows? But we'll find out more. And maybe they did have at least a little knowledge, but maybe they didn't expect them to do that and then realize, like, holy fuck, that's fucked up. Because everyone forgets why people are human. Everyone forgets why we have freedom of speech, because everyone's too busy yelling at each other. So I don't know. And it comes from the top, because it's the same thing Donald Trump Jr. been saying, same thing that Trump's been hinting at, especially with what Pam Bondi said about what they believe is hate speech now, even though you go to the executive orders on January 20th, that does not allow the federal government to, one, censor, and two, to impede on protected free speech. It's hypocritical, and it just needs to be called out for what it is. So this is what's probably going to happen. Kid's going to be like, well, I grew up believing this, then talk to my friends. They clearly weren't that great friends, and if they knew about this and didn't really do anything about it, then shame. That's bad. But people just aren't taught about the significance of existence, and it's clear. Everyone's too busy hating. So, just like every other incident, nothing to do with being left wing, being empathetic. If he was really left wing, he wouldn't be doing that. We know that. Who called for the arrest and maybe even the death penalty for Joe Biden, by the way?